On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview the Kansas Jayhawks against the BYU Cougars on Tuesday night in the Big 12.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Give me a follow on social media at DJohnsonRadio. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of The Action, we are previewing Kansas against BYU. Cougars coming into town for the first time as a member of the Big 12, taking on the Jayhawks. Before we get into that, we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. We're going to start with the top storylines of the game, move on to our BYU scouting report, matchups of the game for KU, and our Hawks to Soar for the Jayhawks. Let's start with our storylines. This is the first meeting between the two as members of the Big 12. Now, it'll be a different type of test when KU has to go to BYU for the first time, because that is actually a very difficult place to play. You add in the increased altitude of playing there. Everybody's playing well at home in the Big 12, obviously, but that'll be a different situation. But still, first meeting with a new member, that's always kind of cool in its own way. And Kansas does get to play, each and every one of the new schools, though they don't get home and homes with everyone just yet. But I think you are posed with quite the challenge, because BYU comes into this one as a team that I view as like, okay, when I look at teams that come into Allen Fieldhouse and get wins, you have to play really tough. Sometimes we've seen teams just come in and they just shoot lights out. Like I remember there was an Iowa State team, 5-6 years ago, that came in and hit like 23s or something and won in overtime in Allen Fieldhouse. That's the type of team that BYU scares you with if they're shooting well from the outside. Now, the other big storyline coming into this one is the injury with Kevin McCullar. Bill Self said on radio at the end of last game and before last game for KU that basically Kevin McCullar's bone bruise on his knee is obviously a point where he can't really operate right now. He was doubtful for the BYU game is what he said, coming up on Tuesday. So I would just assume he's going to be out for this one. And the goal is to have him 100% in the NCAA tournament. But he also mentioned that, it's not like a certainty that they're going to get him back again this season. And that is obviously very scary, but that becomes, again, a storyline in this game that you're not expecting to have Kevin McCullar. So you just kind of assume Nick Timberlake will be the starter again. Started for Kevin last game, and he had a good game, and it'll be once again increased minutes for some of the guards with Marco Jackson and some of this stuff. And I think where it becomes really interesting, we're going to get into the BYU scouting report here in a moment. But BYU has a lot of shooters, and you have to be very attentive off the ball and attentive with your defense. Well, without Kevin McCullar, one of your best defenders, and with extra minutes for Nick Timberlake, not a great defender, Marco Jackson, a freshman who maybe you can get lost off the ball here or there, extra minutes for those guys, and Furphy's not a great defender yet. Is that worrisome in a matchup like this? This is also a big game for Big 12 tournament seeding. I guess right now Kansas is in a spot where if they can win out the final 4 games, then maybe they still have a shot at winning at least a share of the Big 12 title, but still that's not a guarantee at this point in time. Either way, though, I've talked about this before. It is very important this year to get a top 4 seed in the Big 12. Currently, Kansas is a 3 seed, but they're not far off from being possibly a 5 or 6 seed, because the pack right behind them is not far behind, and there's a lot of teams that are right behind. And if BYU won this one, they'd only be a game back of Kansas in the Big 12. Get that top 4 seed, you get the double bye. And for a team that doesn't have a lot of depth for Kansas, that would be so important, not just for how far they want to go in the Big 12 tournament, but for being rested going into the following week, which will be the NCAA tournament. Right now, BYU is the 7 seed for what it's worth there. And for them, you're trying to make sure that you get I think it's top 10 seeds secure, at least the first bye, possibly. They should be in good shape for that. So BYU is 19-8 on the season, 7-7 in Big 12 play. They went 12-1 in non-con, just absolutely pummeled a bunch of bad teams. They did have a really good home win against San Diego State. That's a really solid opponent. NC State's a decent team. They beat them. And the one loss was to a pretty good Utah team. But outside of that, they moved up into the top 5 in KenPom just by slaughtering bad teams. But they opened Big 12 play by going 2 losses, 2 wins. 2 losses, 2 wins. And over the last 6 games, they've gone 16-point loss at Oklahoma, 6 and 2-point home wins, respectively, against Kansas State and UCF. 10-point loss at Oklahoma State, 7-point home win against Baylor, and a 10-point loss most recently on Saturday at Kansas State. You might notice a home-away trend there, that they're winning a lot of their home games, losing a lot of the road games. Welcome to the Big 12, where that's happening to schools like Kansas. They're just 2-6 on the road this season. More than anything, though, it's just about if they're hot or not from three-point range, which they've tended to be not as much on the road. Maybe they're just more comfortable shooting at home. Maybe there's something about the environments. I don't know, whatever it is, but that's kind of how they roll. They shoot a lot of threes. If they make them, they're going to probably win. And that brings us to what they do well. This is a top 10 offensive efficiency team in the country, according to KenPom, and they've been top 5 in Big 12 only games. Shoot a lot of threes. When I say a lot, I mean over half of their field goal attempts are three-point attempts. 51% of their shots are from three. And yes, that does lead the Big 12 and is top 5 in the entire country. And as you'd imagine, if they take a lot, yes, they're going to make a good amount, 35%. Now, it's not 40%, but when you consider the volume, the teams know they're going to shoot a lot of three. To shoot 35% from three on that high volume is very, very impressive. And while that is kind of what sticks out and scares you the most, I will say you do have to be careful here, because they do take advantage of the pressure that you have to put, the attention you have to bring to the outside, and they can take advantage by getting easy buckets inside and having some good big men finish on the inside. They've got a litany of those, and right now they're top 10 in the country in two-point offense, and first, even above Kansas, in Big 12 only games in two-point offense. Overall, they're top 20 in effective field goal percentage offense, top 60 in turnover rate offense, so they avoid turnovers, top 40 in offensive rebounding rate, so they get extra possessions too. A lot of missed shots on threes or long rebounds, they chase them out. They don't get shots blocked because they take a lot of jumpers. That makes sense. They shoot free throws well, as you'd expect, and they're top 5 in assist to field goal made rate, so they share the ball well. This is just an elite of the elite offense. On the defense side, not as good, but this is still a top 20 defensive rebounding rate team, so don't expect to have a big offensive rebounding game. Not that that's been the case for Kansas so far this year, and they're top 3 in the conference in Big 12 only games in defensive rebounding rate. What they haven't done well offensively, the only thing that they haven't done well there is they're kind of allergic to getting to the free throw line. Makes sense. They shoot a bunch of three-point shots. If you take a bunch of jump shots, you're not going to get to the free throw line as much. Bottom tier defense by efficiency in Big 12 only games, and they rank outside the top 60 nationally. They do not force turnovers. They don't get blocked shots or steals. They're bottom 4 in Big 12 only games in all of those categories, and bottom 2 or 3 in a couple of them. They're just 10th in Big 12 games in two-point defense, so below average two-point defense in Big 12 games. And teams have shot 35% from three against them in league action. They've also been fouling a ton in Big 12 play. They have the worst rate in the Big 12 of putting teams to the free throw line. So I just want to get out in front of this now. If this is a game where Kansas shoots, 28, 30 free throws, and BYU only shoots 10 or 12, there's going to be some dumb, toxic Twitter people talking about, oh, here's the refs again. When in reality, BYU comes in, they don't shoot a lot of free throws because they take a bunch of jump shots, and they have been fouling a lot of teams the other way. We'll see if that ends up bearing out in this one. The personnel for BYU, Dallin Hall is I don't know if it's Dalen, 6'4" guard, really good passer, 9 points, 5 assists per game, good court vision. He is also 35% from three. That'll be a common theme among these players. 6'5" shooting guard, Traven Nell. He might be the best shooter in the country. He gets 11.3 points per game, 41% from three on almost 6 tries per game. He shoots them off screens, off movement, just an elite three-point shooter. 6'5", Spencer Johnson. He is another strong guard who can play kind of 1 through 3 all up and down, 10.6 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.4 assists, does a little bit of everything. 31% from three, not as great there, but still high volume. He's confident taking them, and we'll have some games where he goes off. 6'7", Jackson Robinson plays the 3 and the 4. He leads the team around 14 points per game, 43, 35, 88 shooting splits. So good all around there. Richie Saunders is 6'5". He'll play the wing also, 9.4 points per game, 4 rebounds. He's got 53, 33, 71 shooting splits, more of a 2-point monster, but he can shoot it from the outside. And then when they're not using a wing at the 4, which they do for a good amount of time, but they also play a good amount of, a couple of bigs. It's really the 4 minutes and the 5 minutes are combined when they're not playing the wing by a 6'11" Noah Waterman, who will play some 4, 10.4 points, 5.8 rebounds, 37% from three as a 6'11" guy. a 6'6", 240-pound bowling ball in Fousseyni Traore. They'll play him some at a small ball 5. They'll play him some at a 4. 10.2 points, 4.7 rebounds on 63% shooting. And then Khalifa is a 6'11", 270-pound Nikola Jokic type. I mean, light version of it, right? You're comparing to the NBA MVP here, or whatever, 2-time MVP and finals MVP. But 6.2 points, 4 rebounds, 4.2 assists per game, who despite kind of modest numbers there is second in Evan Miyakawa's offensive BPR in Big 12 play. So keep all that in mind. We'll get to our matchups of the game, player matchups, and Hawks to Soar to finish things up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your first bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players, college basketball players, and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. They have theirs that they're coming up with, so if you don't feel too creative yourself, that's how you can get a hold of it. Ken Palm has the line at about a 4-point game. Usually FanDuel is pretty close to that. Maybe with Allen Fieldhouse, they put it at 5-6 point spread. Maybe it's 4.5, something like that. You can get it on the action, build your own same-game parlay, and you can use some of our player matchups or Hawks to Soar to help you build that. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, matchups of the game here. Number 1 is defending the three-point arc and off-ball defense. This feels like a low-hanging fruit, obvious one, but we've seen Kansas have a lot of games where they haven't done this well, and we've seen other teams spurn them from 3. Some games it's been bad luck. Some games it's been bad defense. A lot of times it's been kind of a combination of both. Well, nobody's going to stress you more from 3 than this BYU team. BYU launches from the outside. Again, over half their shot attempts are three-point shots. BYU has had 11 games this season shooting 35 or more three-point attempts in a game. And that includes 9 games where they've made 14 or more three-pointers. BYU had a bad game on Saturday, shooting the 3-ball, 6 of 31 from 3 against Kansas State. That's their worst game percentage-wise of the season. You could look at that and say, okay, they're trending in their own direction. Oh, you could look at that and say, okay, they struggle shooting on the road compared to at home. You could say maybe they're getting worn out and tired by the Big 12 season and everything, the grind that involves that. Those could be possible. It's also possible that there's a reversion swing, and we've talked about KU's bad luck on three-point defense. Kansas State, they go 6 of 31, and if you watch that game, there were a decent amount of those shots that they missed that were open threes that they just missed. Chances are, with what we've seen in these games against KU, those are probably going in this game because that's just kind of how this stuff works. So I don't know, they'll probably go like 14 of 35 or something. But if you're talking specifics, they're really strong from the corners. Got to watch out for those. In games where BYU is 31% from 3 or worse, they're 0-6. So, I mean, for a team that relies on this so much, if you can make them just below average at it, like, they're kind of screwed. But in games where they're not, they're 19-2, including 9-0 when they shoot 38% from 3 or better. They take so many of them. If they're hitting them at a high clip, going to be tough to beat them. And while BYU has so many shooting threats and fires up so many, they've only shot 32% from 3 in Big 12 only games, which tells me against better competition, if you can stick with them and play physically, they're not a great off the dribble team or as great of a contested 3 team. Where Kansas loses this game is with miscommunication, is with letting guys get wide open threes, is with bad off-ball defense. If you stick with guys from the outside, they'll still hit some threes, but you'll limit that number a pretty big amount. What's scary, though, is with some guys who aren't great defenders or young players who maybe aren't good off-ball defenders. Like, Marco's a good on-ball defender. I don't know if he's as good of an off-ball defender, and a lot of times there's a difference there. Christian Brown was a great off-ball defender. He was, I think, a pretty good, on-ball defender, but he was an even better, off-ball defender. There's a difference between team defense, off-ball defense, on-ball defense, all those sort of things, and that's what really gets tested in this game, which I don't know that that's been Kansas's strength, so it becomes interesting. Number 2, Kansas defending cuts and post-ups. BYU is a bit below the national average in shots at the rim per game, but when they take them, they go in. They're shooting 71.7% at the rim this season. That ranks in the 99th percentile of the country. Reason why? You're so worried about the three-point shots, they spread the floor out, and then you're really reliant on guys on the outside staying in front of their guards because You might, especially with some of their big men, they might lift the line of where Hunter Dickinson is. And all of a sudden now, it's leading to open driving lanes. It's leading to open cuts. It's leading to backdoor cuts where you get faked and you think the guy's going around a screen to catch the ball to shoot a three. And then all of a sudden he back cuts and he has a wide open cut and a layup at the rim. They do it in a lot of ways. Again, this is off-ball defense, very important, but this is the one that stretches a little bit of the team defense side of being aware, being active, having active hands, watching in passing lanes, watching those cutters and everything like that, because you can easily fall asleep and worry so much about the threes that all of a sudden they shoot a bunch of twos and they're getting wide open layups and easy buckets after easy buckets. And then you overemphasize and then you put too much pressure in the paint and then all of a sudden they're getting open threes and it just leads to kind of an endless cycle there. Number 3 is how often can Kansas get the ball inside? This and good passing into the post is what I would kind of add here. Kansas takes shots at the rim at one of the top rates in the country, and they hit them at a 69.4% rate at the rim. That ranks 96th percentile in the country. That's pretty amazing considering the conference they play in, where you're playing a lot of great defenses. And this was, something that was on full display last game against Texas. You dominated on the interior. Well, BYU has actually done a solid job at preventing a ton of shot attempts at the rim, whether it's been, I haven't watched them enough to say if it's ball denial or if it's doubling in the post or just cutting off drives or a combination of all those things. But for whatever reason, they haven't given up a ton of those looks. That said, when teams have gotten the looks, they're shooting 67.2% at the rim. So once you get the shot up, they're going in at a high level. And that puts BYU in the bottom 8 percentile in the land, according to CBB Analytics in that time frame of Big 12 play. So if you can get the good entry pass into Hunter Dickinson, good things are going to happen. You just have to make sure you get it in there and then make sure you're dealing with double teams and stuff well in that situation. Player matchup here. Hunter Dickinson and Khalifa is really fun. It's two big men who will work in the high post. Khalifa as mostly a passer. Dickinson can shoot those shots a lot. I think also the KJ Adams, if they're playing two big men, if they're playing like, let's say Khalifa or Waterman at the 5, and then they have Traore kind of in at the 4, even though, on one hand, Traore would kind of be the 5 and Waterman would be the 4 in the offensive side. I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting how they would kind of invert that, so to speak. But with Traore and KJ Adams, if that gets a matchup where you have two, super strong 6'6", 6'7" wing types who are kind of playing as forward center types, I think that would be a really fun matchup too in this one. And I think, though, the Hunter Dickinson versus Khalifa one is going to have the most impact, though, because if they can kind of stick on their guy one-on-one, it's really going to impact the rest of the defensive game plan in a very positive way for either team. Let's continue on with our Hawks to Soar KU players we think can have good matchups and stick out in this one. First, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite sporting event should not be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means that if you find tickets for the same price in the same row, same section for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can get tickets right now on Game Time for the BYU game for just $33. Just go to the Game Time app and you can see the seat views of where exactly you're going to be sitting. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hawks to Soar KU players we think are set up for good matchups here for KU on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll have a KU BYU recap at some point late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. So Khalifa is a great offensive player, really good passer. He opens things up for the rest of the BYU shooters, unselfish player, and allows open driving lanes because he can play in the high post and up to free throw line and 3-point line, and then dice you up and pass the ball and everything. And he can hit a little hook shot on the inside if you let him get there. He's not as much of a great defensive player. And so I do think Hunter Dickinson can win that matchup when he's on offense. And then if they do go small with Traore at the 5, Traore is a super strong dude, a bowling ball of a big man. He's really fun to watch. But that would be a gigantic height advantage for Hunter Dickinson. That would be 7-8 inches of height advantage in the matchup. So because of that, and then you combine BYU does play kind of an analytic game on the defensive end. They try to prevent three-point shots and shots at the rim mainly, but they do give up a lot of mid-range shots and more above the break threes than corner threes. Well, Hunter Dickinson is leading Kansas in mid-range 2 attempts, and he's shooting them at 47%, which is a good mark. So I think a couple things you point to and say, yeah, I think Hunter Dickinson can have himself a good game in this one. For above the break threes, for what it's worth, I found this interesting. DeJuan Harris is shooting 43% in above the break threes this season. BYU doesn't have great defensive guards, so give me DeJuan Harris. Give me Hunter Dickinson for Hawks to Soar for this game against the Cougars. I will be back for a recap of the game on Locked On Jayhawks. Make sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. See you next time with LOJ.